Hello fellow YouTubers, and welcome to episode 22, reading my first self-published novel, Aggravation. The dam was less than a minute away, but Clyde kept his eyes on the ground nevertheless. But when the toe of the earth dam came into view, Clyde looked up, and what he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. At first he thought what he was looking at must be because he was tired, for surely no kangaroo could possibly be that huge. But when the animal stopped drinking and raised itself to a sitting position and stared at him, oh, fucking hell, that's when he wanted to back away and make himself scarce. But while he found it easy to see himself in his mind's eye safe and sound in a cocoon of aluminium 25 yards behind him, his legs had a mind of their own and refused to cooperate. Why did his legs always fail him when he needed them most? The kangaroo, however, unbeknown to Clyde, didn't see this animal standing a little way from it as posing any threat whatsoever, so was content to sit, watch, and wait to observe what this foul-smelling animal was going to do. Perhaps, like itself, it needed to drink, for it had in the past seen these animals take water from water holes, such as this. It observed also that these animals' coats were always different, with no two ever the same, and rarely, if ever, had it seen these animals on all fours, nor did they use their forearms as an aid to stepping forward as it did, nor were they fleet of foot as it was, but slow and awkward as they covered any distant upright on their hind legs. And what did they eat? For never once had it witnessed any of them grazing as he and his kind did, and they were always afraid as they stood their ground before it, just like this one. It could sense it. Clyde was indeed in fear of this giant, made all the worse because he expected to see a large cat and an ape-like creature suddenly appear out of nowhere, just like it was in his dream a fortnight ago. He did, however, resist the urge to look to the sky to see if there was a large bowler hat coming his way. This was different to his dream though, because it was Sandy who had called for him to come and see what he was now staring at. And where was Sandy, he wondered. Surely by now he'd be wondering the same about me. And still, he hadn't heard the generator start up as yet, or smelled smoke which, with a tail breeze as it was, would have been a dead giveaway, if that was the case. So what the hell was he doing? Or is it because I haven't been standing here shitting myself for as long as I think I've been? And what would Sandy do if he was here? I mean, just look at the size and makeup of that animal, for Christ's sake. And it's patently obvious that I'm not in a hurry to be somewhere else. So what the hell do I do? Get those bloody legs moving. And that's what I do. Yes, but if I can manage to do that, what then? Will it take any movement as a threat and come after me? What chance would I have if it did that? None. That's what. Maybe I could throw a bucket at it and piss off real quick before it realised what had happened. Yeah. But what if doing that really pissed it off and it charged me? Why, it could be on me before I turned to take to my heels. Jesus, what to do? What to do? But just at that moment Clyde smelled smoke, and a moment later the roo reared up on his hind legs, leaned back throwing out its massive barrel chest, arms spread, sniffed once, twice, then out of pure instinct turned and bounded away. And as the roo distanced itself from the smoke and possible threat it represented, Clyde turned and bolted toward the smoke that, for him, wasn't a threat, but a possible lifesaver. "Hey, Sandy!" he shouted before he reached the campsite. Then again when he did, "You should have seen what I just saw." Sandy was crouched close to the fire when he heard Clyde's first outburst, but eased himself upright when Clyde came running toward him, repeating himself. Then looked into his eyes when Clyde came to a stop half a metre in front of him, huffing and puffing, almost in tune to the two buckets that swung at his sides, his voice as excited as it was alarmed. "Calm down, Clyde," Sandy said. "Take it nice and easy. Relax. Catch your breath, then tell me what you're all fired up about." It was sound advice, and advice he heeded as he watched Sandy place wood on the fire and as the flames took hold. "Well, that's the fire going," Sandy said. "Now, how are you going?" "You won't believe," Clyde began, excited. "Yes, well, you will believe what I just saw now that I think about it. The biggest goddamn kangaroo on the face of the planet. I tell you, Sandy, it was huge." "It was," Clyde said, raising a hand way above his head height, the bucket still in his grasp. Seeing Clyde standing as he was reminded Sandy of an oversized garden ornament, and he couldn't help but laugh. "Well, I'm glad you think it's funny, but..." Clyde realised then why he was laughing, and he laughed too. "Seriously though," Sandy said, "it makes me wonder how many of those giants there must be, because it can't possibly be the same animal that the sister saw 70 years ago and I saw 30 odd years ago. Now could it? Could it?" Clyde shrugged, placed the buckets on the ground, thought of saying, "I suppose anything is possible when you consider what we've recently experienced," but dismissed the thought because this was different and not possible at all. "Nah, it's just not possible," Sandy said. But his tone of voice, Clyde thought, hinted he wasn't sure about that. Not sure about that at all. But he wasn't sure himself. It was something both men would think about now and then for a long time, but neither would ever be able to completely satisfy themselves one way or the other, for there are many strange things on this earth that can never be explained, simply because we just don't know. "Come on," Sandy said, picking up a bucket. "Let's go and fill these up, then we can have a shower." For Clyde, this would be a new experience, with the need to boil water, transfer 3 saucepans of hot water into a bucket that was then filled up with cold, and then carried to the shower where, standing on a wooden step stool, the entire contents of the bucket were emptied into the shower drum. A hessian blind provided privacy, and grid-like rubber mat fastened to a wooden frame kept feet off the ground away from the otherwise wet soil. Clyde again was impressed with the simplicity of the setup, yet how effective it was, with the 3 saucepans hot water to the amount of cold just right. But of course, it would be. The only drawback, minor as it was, that unlike Sandy, who wore a pair of rubber thongs too during and after his shower, Clyde didn't own a pair, the consequence of which required him to sit naked on the step stool in order to dry his feet and to put on his socks and shoes before anything else. Such a simple and inexpensive thing as a pair of thongs, he thought, would have saved a lot of trouble. He would, he decided, buy 2 pairs when next in town. Alma had a pair in the caravan that Sandy said he could use if they fitted, but they didn't, and Sandy wasn't prepared to lend his, on account he'd caught a particular virulent case of athlete's foot from a pair a friend let him use some time ago. Once bitten, twice shy, and although Clyde didn't suffer from athlete's foot, he could well understand Sandy's feelings. With daylight saving, it didn't start to get dark until around 8, and by the time Clyde and Sandy were sitting before the fire sipping tea in between mouthfuls of leftover sandwiches that had been toasted in a fry pan sitting atop a small bed of coals scraped from the firebed. To a person city-born and raised, it was another example of a simple but efficient means of doing a task without relying on modern conveniences. In fact, Clyde thought, there was a tremendous amount of energy in a campfire when you thought about it. Energy for cooking, boiling water, while providing warmth and comfort that wasn't available from any solitary household appliance. And it was all but free energy, too. Not like this so-called free energy from the sun that cost an arm and a leg to harvest. There was, however, a lot of energy wasted in a campfire, with the majority rising into the night air and serving no purpose whatsoever. So, still, that was irrelevant under the circumstances. A mere bagatelle in lieu of the immense feeling of well-being a campfire provided. And it didn't matter if you were rich or poor, it was still the same in everyone's eyes. For fire doesn't discriminate between the haves and the have-nots. You know, Sandy, Clyde said, breaking the silence, that animal scared the living daylights out of me. I was wondering when you were going to bring that up, because I could tell how uneasy you were when we returned to the dam. I was uneasy, wasn't I? Couldn't stop myself from looking around. Was expecting that giant to turn up again any tick of the clock. Perfectly normal. See, something like that will spook anyone. How did you feel when you saw that big roo on the top of Tall Hill? Small, Sandy said seriously. Very small and vulnerable. Makes you realise how insignificant we are when compared to something like that. It does, doesn't it? Yep, no doubt about that. But do you think it would have hurt me? Only you've had reason to. You see, Clyde, all animals in the bush are capable of doing harm if they're provoked, or you come too close to them by accident. It's purely an instinctive reaction. Look at that spider on the ground over there near the woodpile, for instance. It's minding its own business and doesn't care less about us sitting here. But go over there and hassle it and it'll get its back up quick smart. And who could blame it, Clyde said. And that's the reason some city folk get themselves into all sorts of trouble. Can't resist poking a stick at a snake or spider and then wonder why the animal turned on them. And it's never their fault when that happens. Oh no. Blame the animal, don't they? The stupid morons. Clyde smiled. There's no accounting for plain stupidity. Now is there? No, there ain't. And they get what they deserve, as far as I'm concerned. Anyhow, Clyde said, might be a good idea to start that generator so we can charge those 2 batteries. Later that night, the washing up done, batteries charged, fire tended to for the night, teeth clean. Sandy and Clyde lay in bed at opposite ends of the caravan, talking. How do you reckon you'll go tomorrow? Sandy asked. A little better than today, I hope. Did you bring any deep heat with you by chance? Because if you did, I suggest you give your legs a good rub down. Otherwise you'll be plagued with cramps. I did, and I've already used it. Put it on after I showered. Mr. Wonder you can't smell it. I probably would have if I hadn't used it myself. Great minds think alike, eh? I suppose so. Anyhow, good night, Clyde. Good night, Sandy. The deep heat, however, didn't guarantee immunity from cramp, which is why Clyde woke in pain early Monday morning. Fortunately, it was only a minor spasm in the right calf muscle when compared to the previous cramps he had experienced in the same area over the years. So he was able to flex his toes and gain almost instant relief. Nevertheless, he maintained the posture for a couple of minutes as he looked out the full-width rectangular window to his immediate right, for no other reason than a time-filling diversion. And when he noticed a bank of bright lights to the east penetrating the dense foliage low to the ground, he thought it must be a car or a vehicle of some kind. After all, it was fair to assume that Sandy and he weren't the only people in the forest. And when the lights veered hard left after 10 or 15 seconds, he was convinced it must be a vehicle, and the driver had decided to take a side road for whatever reason. But as he continued to observe the lights moving slowly north, that's what didn't make sense. How could the lights still be in full view when they weren't coming towards him? Of course, that would mean the vehicle was side on, and no vehicle he knew of could travel that way, which meant it must be and that's when the inexplicable happened. Suddenly the lights began to pulsate as they moved slowly vertical. And as Clyde watched wide-eyed, following their ascent, whispering, "Holy smoke, I don't believe it," the brilliant bank of white lights came to an abrupt halt, then went out. "Well, fuck it," Clyde mumbled. He continued to look in the direction to where the lights had been, hoping for, he didn't know what, but whatever it was gone, or there but secreting itself. He gave consideration to getting up to investigate, but he wasn't a brave man, and the thought of wandering the forest in the dead of night close to Tall Hill put pay to that idea in an instant. He expected that further sleep would be denied him as he lay on his right side, eyes open, looking out the window as he ran the short series of events through his mind, convinced that he had had a close encounter. For what other explanation could there be? There weren't any. It was and then he realised he couldn't say it was a UFO because it wasn't flying. Rising, yes, but flying, no. But then again, on the other hand, it defied gravity rising the way it did. So it could still be referred to as a UFO, couldn't it? Yep, no doubt about it. And when one is convinced of something, there's no point in trying to debunk it. Sandy will, though. When I mention it to him in the morning, he'll say, "Don't be daft, Clyde. Of course there are no such things. I'm telling you, Sandy, that there isn't any other explanation for it." "Of course there is. It was probably a car and the lights played tricks on your eyes. That's all it was." What's the point, Clyde thought. Could talk until you were blue in the face and still it wouldn't make any difference. During the next 3 days, Clyde and Sandy slowly but surely worked their way down the steep incline of Tall Hill. But the pyramid that Clyde was convinced was there had yet to be revealed. He had expected, a gut feeling really, that the pyramid would be discovered in the geographical centre of the hill. But when that area was scanned Wednesday afternoon, he was profoundly disappointed. He remained optimistic though, but then he had to, having no other choice because Sandy was beginning to harp on about what a complete and utter waste of time it was. He could well understand how he must feel. After all, this was his obsession and Sandy had been good enough to give up his time for the search of it regardless his feelings to the contrary. And the work was laborious and seemingly never-ending. And any thought that Clyde had that the ascent of the hill would get easier with every passing day just hadn't happened. In fact, the reverse was the case. Even with the distance becoming shorter with the completion of each tier, Clyde found the ascent an ever-increasing strain on his body and mind. So much so that he suggested Thursday be a day of complete rest, and Sandy agreed without reservation. Clyde knew Sandy was faring much better than he, but Superman he may be in Clyde's eyes, he still wasn't immune to the hardship his body endured. So it came as no surprise that both men slept until 8:30 Thursday morning. Sandy had woken at 5 but found it easier to roll over and regain sleep, while Clyde didn't wake until he heard Sandy place the kettle on the stove. And even then he was content to luxuriate in the comfort of the bed. "You're expecting a cup of tea in bed, are you?" Sandy asked flippantly. "That'll be good, Sandy." "Real good," Clyde replied jokingly. "Yes, well, I suppose an old fellow like you needs a bit of coddling now and then." "I need a new body. That's what I need." Join the queue. After breakfast, Sandy volunteered to go to the dam and fill the 2 buckets. He also wanted to check his yabby trap he had placed in the dam late Sunday afternoon. 5 minutes later he returned with a bountiful harvest. But before they could be cooked, 2 things had to be done to Sandy's way of thinking. First he needed to fill the bucket with clean drinking water to enable the yabbies to purge themselves, that is, rid their systems of the impurities of the muddy water. Once that was done, an hour was sufficient. He would then place them in the refrigerator for another hour to reduce their metabolic rate. Then they would be ready to meet their painless demise and take pride of place on today's lunchtime menu. "We'll need to light a fire," Sandy said, stepping from the caravan after placing the yabbies in the refrigerator. It was warm and would soon be very warm, and Clyde wondered why they needed a fire. Take too long to cook the yabbies on the stove, and the smell of them cooking would stay in the confines of the caravan for hours after. Fair enough, Clyde said. With the fire burning and nothing else to do, it was an opportune time to sit under the shade of the annex, sip tea, munch biscuits, and talk about whatever popped into their heads. Sandy began by saying, "I think I might go for a walk later in the afternoon and see if I can bag a rabbit or two. You want to come along?" "Sure, I wouldn't mind a feed of rabbit. Been a long time since I had one. My mother used to buy rabbit on a somewhat regular basis when I was a kid, but you don't see them that often in the butchers anymore." "You're right about that. And when you do, they're usually from a farm and cost an arm and a leg. Don't make sense to me when you consider the rabbit numbers are on the increase again, although I doubt they'll ever be in the numbers they once were 50 years ago. I suppose you experienced those numbers firsthand, but I only saw them on the movie-tone news bulletins at the pictures. And a sight they were too, I can tell you. Why, the hills around here were teeming with them that gave the illusion the hills were moving. Could have sat in the one spot shooting rabbits all day long and not needed to move, and come back to the same spot tomorrow and continue on where you left off yesterday." "Nature gone berserk," Clyde said. "Yes, that's exactly what it was, although I never thought of it that way." "Same thing with the American and European cockroach," Clyde said. "You don't have them here in the country, but in Sydney, indeed, all up and down the coast, there isn't a house that isn't teeming with them. And there's nothing you can do to permanently rid your house of them, either. They just keep on coming back no matter what you do. And you wouldn't believe how noisy they can be when their numbers are up, considering there's really nothing to them. I could lie in bed some nights and actually hear them scurrying about on the linoleum floor in the kitchen. And don't believe this bullshit that only dirty houses have them, for nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it's quite the reverse, because most city and suburban folk keep their houses clean, and still they proliferate." "I wasn't aware of that," Sandy said. "Still, like I said before, city-country makes no difference because we all have our crosses to bear. Country folk have to put up with plagues of mice and locusts, and city folk have to put up with cockroaches and too many people." "I like that analogy," Clyde said. "I like that a lot. But on a different note," Sandy said, "and I meant to ask you this before, but when I said I never saw my life flash before my eyes, you know, I was wondering about you." "No, I was in too much pain." "What about the second time?" "No, not then, either." "No, nor me. So does that mean we're the odd ones out, or is it all bullshit as I said it was?" "I don't know, Sandy. Different things for different people, I expect." "I suppose so, but me and you is different. So what does that say?" "It's all bullshit. That's what it says." Sandy smiled. "I knew we were going to say that." "Well, here's one thing I bet you didn't know I was going to say. And that's getting together to write that book we promised each other we would do if we survived Charles MacArthur." "I was hoping you'd forgotten about that. Of course, not only am I no good with technological things, I'm no good with words as well." "You don't have to be," Clyde said with enthusiasm, "because all you have to do is write down your personal interpretation of what happened in your own words, and leave the rest up to me. You make it sound so easy. A walk in the park, my friend. A walk in the park. And who knows, you just might surprise yourself." "I doubt it, but I'll give it a go," Sandy said with resignation, preparing to roll a smoke. "That's all I ask. And besides, just imagine seeing your name as co-author on a book cover and knowing it couldn't have been written without you. I tell you, Sandy, it'll make you feel 10 feet tall, it will. Believe me." For lighting his cigarette, Sandy asked, "So what do we call this book?" I haven't given consideration to a title as yet, but I'm sure you and I can come up with something truly befitting such an incredible foray into the world of the supernatural. Clyde's mind was already working on a title, and will continue to do so whenever the opportunity arose. Sandy, however, had already convinced himself that he didn't have the imagination for such a task and was therefore useless for him to even consider wasting time on it. Nevertheless, as they sat in silence looking at the fire, Sandy was surprised to find that his mind had other ideas and was throwing words quick and fast that he couldn't but help give due consideration. Hereafter, ghosts, demons, black smoke, coffin, cemetery, dark, fear, pain, fire, lightning, near death, grave, blood, grave, fear, grave fears. Grave fears, he thought. That's not bad. Not bad at all. Excited, he considered mentioning the name to Clyde there and then, but a moment later decided to keep it to himself. For who knows, maybe he might come up with something else, something better. Following their lunch, of which Clyde was of the opinion would set you back $60 at any good Sydney restaurant, the sky had become overcast with the promise of rain. Neither man was bothered by that, not in the least, for both were feeling the effects of such a magnificent repast, and with that contentment came lethargy. So if it rained, and they would simply enjoy the sound of it on the annex, as they sat in their chair, or on the caravan roof they decided to lay in their bed. After all, this was a day of total rest. In fact, Clyde decided on the latter. He had a good book to continue reading, not one of his, but a good book nonetheless. And he had some thinking to do. He was still convinced the pyramid was there, somewhere, but maybe his theory that it was inside the hill was wrong, and it was, as the sisters had originally thought, buried under the hill all along. But then how big would it need to be to act as a beacon if it was a product of advanced alien technology? A box of matches, a pack of cards, a shoebox, what? These were the questions to ask himself as he lay down trying to read, and he had no answers to those questions. He didn't know. Perhaps he was wasting his time, he was forced to admit, like so many others in the past in their quest for what they thought existed, the treasure of Oak Island and that of King Solomon Mines, Lassiter's lost reef of gold, the lost city of Atlantis, and the Holy Grail were but a few that came to mind. But then what did he have to lose? He hadn't spent a fortune, he had all the time in the world, and he was but 15 minutes from home. So if he and Sandy failed to find what he was searching for, then he could simply go it alone, at his leisure, and continue on 1 or 2 days a week. Yes, I'll do that, he decided. We'll finish the survey of the hill that I can concentrate on the area around the base of the hill by myself. At ease now, his mind clear, he settled down and commenced reading. And it was then that it began to rain. It was only a gentle precipitation, but a sound that soothed like no other. And before too long, Clyde closed his eyes and began to doze. When he woke 3 hours later, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear, and Sandy was sitting on the edge of his bed, cleaning a rifle. I will call it quits. And this may, well, that was page 476. I've only got 476, 24, 36 pages to read. So this may be the penultimate episode. Who knows? We'll see what happens. I want to thank you for watching, or listening, or just listening. And until next time, bye for now.